Hi, everybody. My name is Nick Phan, and I am the Artistic Director of Collaborative Arts Institute of Chicago, and I'm here for our third episode of Heard Over the Piano with our special guest today, Shannon McGinnis, one of my co-founders and our Director of Education here at CAIC, and one of our festival guest artists, Myra Huang. If you both would love to unmute yourselves and join me. Hi.
Hello.
How are you
Hey.
guys?
Good.
So nice to see everybody here.
Yeah.
So Myra, tell us, where are you right now?
I'm in Philadelphia right now. I've been here for a week and a half. We've been recording some digital content for Opera Philadelphia. The first program was Lawrence Brownlee and Friends, where Larry Brownlee and three other local opera singers, Karen Sleck, Sarah Schaefer, and Lindsay Reynolds. We did a program together. And then this second week, we've been recording Cycles of My Being by Taishan Sori with the original chamber music orchestration. So it's been really intense, but really fun and so good to be back at work. So
can you tell, I mean, not everybody who's watching may know everything about the Taishan Story piece. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. It was written for Larry Brownlee, and Taishan is an African-American composer. The lyrics were by Terrence Hayes and Larry also. And it's a song cycle written about the Black man's experience in America. And it's a very, very powerful piece. It's not, you know, it's not easy listening per se, but it really is powerful in how it describes perhaps the perspective, you know, of being a Black man who loves America, but does America love him back? You know.
Very topical.
So, yeah, for sure. We've actually toured it for a couple of years all over the country. And we went to, you know, really kind of conservative places like Provo, Utah. I believe Provo, Utah is the most conservative voting district of America. But it was like standing ovation every bit, and it was received really, really enthusiastically. So that's just so encouraging because of art and music to share a message, and somehow I think it communicates in a like more direct way where people can really receive the message. So that's been a really beautiful experience to be a part of.
I can imagine. Sorry, I should finish introducing Shannon and say, Shannon, where are you? But
yes,
I got, you know, there's this moment of like this piece, and it's just, you know, it's
no, it's amazing and so relevant today, and really does speak to the, I don't know, the power of when we're able to hear from someone about their specific human experience, that often we're able to hear the message that contains a lot more easily than all of the noise in the abstract, you know. I think that's great. I'm here in Chicago, in my home in Printers Row, downtown Chicago. Here with my husband, and you know, in my normal life, my husband travels for work, but he's been home since March. So we're learning to live together all the time, and it's going mostly well. But I teach at Roosevelt University at the Chicago College of Performing Arts. We began classes 4 weeks ago. We are fully remote, so I teach 2 diction courses and a graduate seminar that I'm delivering via Zoom. And I coach about 18 singers and seeing them all online as well. So it's been a pretty intense month thus far, and the months getting ready for classes was pretty wild as well. So, but we're easing into the groove and making it work, and very much looking forward to the upcoming festival and getting to play and make music with some wonderful artists.
Yeah, so this is kind of our first festival event, even though it's sort of an informal introduction to the festival. For the next month, we're really going to be focusing on the festival theme of women and women composers, celebrating this 100th anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment, which is the amendment that gave women the right to vote in the United States. And so our first event is coming up on October 2nd, and Myra is leading a masterclass with some Chicago area pianists and singers on songs by women composers and poets of color. Did I describe that correctly?
Yeah, exactly right. So composers and poets who are women of color. We have 5 singer and pianist teams participating in the masterclass, which we're really excited about. They had a great response, and some wonderful repertoire will be featured.
So I kind of wanted to feature you both today because I wanted to sort of discuss, women as collaborative pianists. It's something that has it's been on my mind. I happen to work with the two of you primarily. I always joke with everybody that you two are my first right of refusal when it comes to recital partners. And I am so lucky that I get to work with you as often as I do. So I primarily work with women collaborative pianists, but it was interesting when we were all in Philadelphia in January on the Emerging Voices project with the Philadelphia Chamber Music Society. I was sitting on a panel with a woman scholar from, I forget which university she's at in the UK. Her name is Carrie Owen. And she made this really interesting observation that it was really notable to her that for our Emerging Voices project in Philadelphia, that the two of you were the pianists, because she pointed out it's actually a quite male-dominated field, which is not necessarily something that I had naively even thought of, probably because I'm mostly spending my time with the two of you. So I was just thinking that this might be an interesting, especially since the masterclass is first up to bat, broadcasting next Friday. I thought this might be a good opportunity for us to ruminate on this subject. So why don't we start pretty basically?
Interesting. Yeah.
Why don't we just start pretty basically? Can we just, CAIC knows you both well, but can we just start with, for anybody who may not know, just tell us how you got into music. And also as part of that, how did you obviously started playing the piano, but then how did that sort of lead you to playing for singers? Shannon, would you mind starting?
Oh, sure, I'm happy to begin. So of course, I started playing the piano at a young age. I was, I think, 6 years old when I began. As I went through high school, I played competitions and did all of that. I knew that I wanted to at least major in music in college, but I didn't really know what that would mean for me. I grew up in a very small town in North Carolina. There weren't a lot of opportunities for classical musicians. And so I sort of instinctively felt that there was sort of this binary path for me, that I would either be a concert pianist or I would teach music at a school, or I would teach piano lessons. And neither of those paths really kind of appealed to me, but I knew that I wanted to make a life in music. And so when I went to college, it was with that in mind, that I went to a liberal arts college and majored in music, studied piano, and went at that with the idea that I would sort of just figure out where that would lead. And fortunately for me, I was an excellent sight reader. And immediately within the first few days of school, voice teachers pulled me into their studios. And so I started right away playing for singers and found that I had a true affinity for that, and natural instinct for it. And I also really loved language in a way that I had not realized before. And so being able to be in a room with a singer and with the human voice and with words in French and Italian and German and English, and to experience the power of poetry. This was all kind of a new world to me, and it really excited me. And so through my career as an undergraduate, I continued to do more and more of that type of work. And I played chamber music as well, but working with singers was really a passion of mine early on. And so when I began thinking about the next steps of my training, graduate school, I sought out a program that had a dedicated collaborative piano program and a teacher by the name of Carolyn Bridger. She has since passed away at Florida State University. So she took me on as a student and was a wonderful teacher for me. She was very technically grounded, which I needed at the time. And I also had the great fortune to work with first-rate voice teachers at Florida State University at that time. These were teachers who come from the tradition of true voice building and a real complete understanding, not just of vocal technique, but of interpretation of song in particular. One of my favorite classes at Florida State was team taught by a wonderful voice teacher named Yvonne Chanella, who has quite a long reputation in our world, and Timothy Hookman, a fantastic pianist and coach. And they team taught a song repertoire class that really opened so many doors to me. And it was while I was at Florida State that I had the opportunity to participate in a master class with Martin Katz. And that experience was pivotal. I felt in my work in that short period of time on stage in front of gobs of people, I felt that this was a teacher who really spoke my language. And I understood what he was saying, and I felt so at home learning from him, even in an experience where I was quite nervous, obviously. And I said at that time that if I decided or had the opportunity to pursue a doctoral degree, that I would want to do that with Martin Katz. So after I finished my master's degree at Florida State, I spent 2 years as a staff pianist at a university in the southern part of Georgia, Columbus State University. Had a wonderful music program, and I really got a lot of good work done there. Again, playing for singers, playing for guest artists, student recitals, competitions, all of that, and started to get the itch to go back to school. And I started to feel that maybe what I wanted my life to be was a life in academia as a college professor. And so I decided to audition for doctoral programs, and I set up several auditions, and my audition at the University of Michigan with Martin Katz was the first audition. And I was fortunate in that I think my audition was on the last possible date of the audition calendar for them. And so he was able to offer me a spot in his studio that day. So I canceled my other auditions, and because that's where I knew that I wanted to be. And so I started that degree program, and that's where I met the wonderful Nick Phan, and had just an outstanding experience there. Not an easy one. My first year in particular was fraught with feelings of imposter syndrome, feeling like, where am I? I'll never forget my very first studio class, hearing one of my colleagues and a violinist play the John Corigliano violin sonata. And this was studio class, but it might as well have been Carnegie Hall for as wonderfully prepared as it was. And I just, I sort of felt out of my depth there and realized how much work that I had to do. But I jumped in head first and got it done, and felt like by the time I left that I had really absorbed everything I could possibly absorb, both from my primary teacher, Martin Katz. I also did quite a bit of work with a wonderful pianist named Catherine Collier. and countless voice teachers, instrumental teachers, academic professors. And from there, I took a tenure track position at a small university in Missouri called Truman State University. And I worked there for 3 years and I loved it. I had wonderful students and colleagues. Phan came and did a recital with me there, one of my favorite memories of my time there. And along about year 2, I started to realize that while I had really enjoyed and gotten so much out of my academic training, that I was missing the practical, real world experience of sort of being on the market, right? Being in a large city and being an accompanist for hire, so to speak. So that prompted me to consider a move outside of academia, to step out of that world, which can be kind of insular and somewhat sheltered, and to put myself out in the world. And that's when I moved to Chicago. And those of you who are familiar with CAIC or tuned into one of these sessions a couple weeks ago will know that a couple other pianist friends of mine and wonderful colleagues joined forces and started an accompanying studio in Chicago. And from there, I launched a freelance career in the area, continued to keep a foot in academia, doing some adjunct work, which helped pay the bills and lended some much needed stability to that time. But through there, lots of wonderful opportunities have arisen, and not the least of which is my experience with CAIC and opportunities that have arisen through that organization and beyond. And so here we are today. That's me in a nutshell, I believe.
That's an amazing story.
Thank you.
So, Myra, would you like to share yours?
Sure. So I was doing solo piano at Juilliard, and I think probably my junior year, they have a community outreach program where the students go to, hospitals and nursing homes to perform. And I was paired up with a singer, Sarah Wolfson. And she was really the first singer I had ever played for. And she gave me her music, and we would go out, and do our thing. And I just remember one day we were coming back from one of the, engagements, and we got out of the subway. We were walking, across Broadway back to Juilliard, and she turned to me and she was like, you might think about like doing this for real. She was like, you're really good at it, And I was like, I had grown up, my older brother is a cellist, so I grew up doing chamber music my whole life. I also was a very natural sight reader. And so playing with people was always natural to me. And I think what helped, so after she made that comment, I had another friend, Kelly Kuo, who was studying at the Manhattan School of Music with Warren Jones. And so I was like, let me check it out, let me check this out kind of thing. And so I went to Warren's concert at Carnegie Hall with Sam Raimi. And that must have been 1998, maybe. And I was just so floored. Like, I'll never forget the reaction that I had at that concert, sitting in the nosebleed section of Carnegie Hall. I was just so moved by Warren's playing. I mean, Sam Raimi was great, but like all I was listening to really was Warren that night. And I was so inspired, and I just thought, like, I don't know about the working with singers thing and opera and all of this, but I just know that if I study with Warren, I will become a better musician. So that's when I started, looking up all the requirements for auditions for collaborative piano. I did decide to audition for Juilliard as well. I figured, why not? So talk about, I know that imposter syndrome feeling, Shannon, because, you have to sing and play for those auditions. First of all, in a foreign language that like you don't speak. You know, I studied French in high school, but I was doing, you know, Italian. I was doing Susanna from La Notte di Figaro, and I felt so dumb, you know. But I asked Sarah to help me with the Italian, and you know, and I did the audition. I did both Juilliard and Manhattan School. I had a great experience because for my audition for Juilliard, at the time Sam Sanders was still alive and on staff, and so I went in to do my audition, you know, played my things, and you had to also do instrumental. And so I was doing some Beethoven Violin Sonata or something. Finished and left. It went well. And as I was walking back to the elevator, the monitor came running after me, and he was like, "Hey, they actually want to talk to you." And so they invited me back into the room, and you know, they wanted to know more about me, you know, and so I think they saw on my application that I was at Juilliard as piano undergrad. So it was a very affirming moment, you know, where they were like, you know, we see that you're studying piano, and if you wanted, you could continue piano solo, you know, while you pursue your collaborative piano degree here. So they offered that, which was really nice. And I felt honored because Sam Sanders was Sam Sanders, you know, and I felt, you know, very encouraged by that. And then I went up to Manhattan School and did my audition there. Promptly got a phone call from another faculty member who was basically telling me that I wouldn't survive in the opera world because I was Asian and female. So that was an interesting experience. I think they were trying to convince me to study with them in their studio, but I did get accepted in studio, and I just really wanted to study with Warren, you know, and so I went with him, and it was just information overload, you know. I mean, like, I could sight read anything, but as we all know, the world of playing repertoire with singers, it involves so much more than just playing the notes. And your awareness of the poetry, of the language, of how, you know, the pronunciation of the language inflects the phrasing, how singers breathe, you know, what singers need from you, the time you need to give them, the times that you need to push them, you know, all of the above. Not to mention the psychology of it all, you know. Yeah, I was very, and I'm kind of the type of person who really wants to feel like they have a handle on something before kind of announcing to the world, like, I can do this, you know. And I remember that they would have students coach the singers. And in my mind, it was like, what are we doing? Like, how do I coach a singer? I have no idea how to coach a singer. What? But then, like, you know, I'd have like other friends or colleagues who are just like diving right into it, you know. And and to this day, you know, I just reflect on that difference, you know, like, and maybe, you know, some of the colleagues had more background in singing, and so they inherently knew, you know, how to coach. But for me, it was like, okay, this rhythm is, all I could talk about was rhythm, you know, and pitch.
I'm sure there was
somewhat
plenty.
important things.
It is important, but I just knew there was so much more that I didn't know how to talk about, you know. So I charged really little because I felt like I hadn't earned my stripes yet, you know, to really kind of earn a decent coaching fee. But anyway, right after that, I auditioned for the HGO studio and got in. And so straight away, I went to Houston. Well, I failed to mention that, you know, Nick and I met at MSM briefly because he came to audition, for the grad program. So I did play his audition at MSM. That's the first time we met. He was very, very sick, but of course he got in anyway. And then I went to HTO for 2 years. Amazing program in terms of the training that I got there. At that time, truly, there was no other program, I believe, in the States that gave you such hands-on practical training, because they didn't, isolate the young artists to just do some, programs or concerts. They used us on the main stage productions as staff, with a lot of preparation, of course. But I was, right off the bat, just playing production rehearsals, and there's no better way to learn than to just, be thrown into the ocean and sink or swim. So, and we were working with world-renowned singers and conductors. So it was very high pressure, These young artist programs, they're really not, they're very high pressure situations, and they're not necessarily a sheltered, environment, because you are expected to deliver, and perform, and that's part of the training. But I grew so much under, Richard Beto, and Diane Zola was the director at the time, and Patrick Summers was and is, the artistic director. But so I finished there, and then after that, I just started working in the opera world, and I was part-time staff at New York City Opera and Washington National Opera at the same time, doing productions there for a couple of years. And then I got a wonderful opportunity to move to Spain to work at the Palau de les Arts, which was a brand new opera house and project really sponsored by the EU in Spain, in Valencia, Spain. And the music directors were Lauren Mazel and Zubin Mehta. We did the Ring Cycle there. It was fun and fantastic, the Arts and Science Center where the Opera House is. Well, first of all, the Opera House building looks like Darth Vader's helmet, except in white, The architect was Santiago Calatrava, and the entire grounds, which might have been half a mile long, there was a reflecting pool, an aquarium and science museum, these skeletal structures all in white. Every day I would walk to work and just be like, can't believe I work here. But I had the time of my life there. I think it's because there was no structure in the sense of there was no head of music staff and plethora of music staff. It was me and a local pianist who was from Valencia, and they would contract out some specialists. So when we did Noche de Figaro or whatever, they would bring another coach in to do recits or whatever. But it was great because it was me and the conductor, it was just direct contact. And they just really appreciated us, because they had nobody else. And it was really, really, really fun to work in that way, I think. The conductors just ended up really trusting you, maybe a little too much. Lauren Mazel would constantly leave rehearsal and he'd just be like, my tempi. And he would just be gone, and we didn't always have a cover conductor, on staff at the time. So I remember doing Don Giovanni, piano, dress, rehearsal, and Lauren just left. And I'm in the pit, and I'm just like, you all can hear me, right? And just the recits, it actually somehow went fine from what I remember. Singers might have a different story to tell, but it was really, really fun. And then, my husband, Ed, came with me to Spain. He quit his fancy Wall Street job to be a kept man for 2 years. It was a very special time in our lives. And at that point we were I'm kind of telling my whole
It's fine.
career life story, but it's all kind of related to what we're talking about. We had been married, I think 6 years then, and we were like, it's time to start a family. We might as well try, and we were too young to know that you don't time these things. We didn't have a lot of friends who were married and trying to have kids, and we didn't know that it can be a very difficult process, and it's kind of foolish to say like, okay, we're gonna get pregnant now and like, have the baby then, whatever. But we were, in our naivete, we were like, okay, so if we get pregnant in September, she'll be born around May, and then we'll go home like in August, and that's exactly how it happened. So I got pregnant in September and she was born in May, and we went home in August. So my first daughter, Ellie, was born in Valencia. I get asked a lot about her citizenship, but she is American because by law in Spain, the child gets the parents' citizenship. I think there might be a way for her to apply one day for EU. I don't know. Things are different now, so I'm not quite sure, but maybe one day. So we came back to the States, and really, Nick, I think that's when we started doing regular concertizing together.
Yep.
We connected in Houston, but I think that was really when we started to regularly work together. And that really worked well for me because having a baby now, going to an opera house for a month at a time was, in my mind, impossible. I know it. I know people do it and they make it work. But for what I was wanting to do, it wasn't possible. And so the concerts worked really well because usually it's a 2-night, 3-day trip, and that I could pull off. And at that time, Ed started working at Columbia University, and there was a lot of flexibility. So when it was just Ellie, he would come with me, on the tours. And I know Nick has memories of me like pumping during intermission backstage, and all that stuff. And then in 2011, I was approached about doing head of music at New York City Opera. The New York City Opera at that time already was beginning to struggle. I think the writing was kind of written on the wall about how things were going there. And so they were about to move out of Lincoln Center and lose their permanent home and start moving around and performing in different venues. And I thought about it. It was kind of a hard decision because that's such a big job, head of music staff anywhere. You really have to be available at all times, for that job. But I couldn't resist the opportunity to learn what that was. And so I took the job. And by that time, I had my second child, Abby, and she was very young. They were very young. So they were at that time, I think 3 and 1, which is a very challenging period of child rearing. It's high energy. You are exhausted. They are little. They are not independent. They need you so very much. But, Ed is very, very supportive. There goes Nick. He'll be back in a second.
I'll be back. Sorry, guys. It has to happen once an episode.
And I learned so much in that job, so much, particularly about what my style of authority was. And I'd be curious to hear from you, Shannon, about that aspect of doing your job. But, I came into the job being very aware that, number one, I look very young. I'm petite. I'm soft-spoken. And those things were on my mind, in the fact that I was the authority for many things in rehearsals, and also observing the way people would respond to me, because I think that the way that I look and the energy that I bring, I think I perhaps felt more like a colleague, to them, which it's not that you're not a colleague, but when you hold a position like that, there is a line, you know. And so there were a couple of times when I needed to put my foot down, which I did. And I learned, I think, grit from that job. I learned how to stick to my convictions, and I didn't have to do it in an aggressive way per se, but I learned to not back down when I really believed that something was right or wrong, you know. And that job is very much an HR job. You're constantly dealing with the problems, you know, that are happening in any given production, particularly with personnel. So if you have any singers who, you know, are sick and not doing well, or didn't come prepared, or any kind of, you know, dynamic issues with the conductor or director, you know, you are, you know, right in the thick of those things. And I remember being in a couple of very difficult conversations where, you know, the topic of firing someone, you know, was coming up. And I remember, it's interesting because one of those conversations, I was very convicted that we needed to stick with the person that we hired, you know, because they were prepared and we offered them this job and we committed to them. And I really put my foot down, and they listened, which was great. And then the second time we had a hard conversation like that, I was very convinced that this person needed to be let go. They didn't come prepared, you know, and became sick on day 2. We never got to hear this person sing out once. And their her manager was advocating, you know, to keep the singer. And I was very upset with the manager, actually, because this person could not sing the role well. And I felt that they were not putting their singer's best interest first. And I said that to them. You know, I said, you know, as this person's manager, I find it surprising that you want to put them in this position because it will not show them off well. They will fail, you know, and they will get terrible reviews and all of that. So, yeah, that was a big learning curve for me, but really, really great to go through. But after that, I was kind of like, I think I'm done with that. So anyway, let me stop there. I'm sorry, that was very long.
No, it's fantastic. Actually, it's listening to both of your stories, it kind of gives me a little bit more insight into sort of, I mean, I know your stories and I know this, but just hearing them in this context right now, and thinking about this idea of sort of gender roles in this profession. It's interesting because the history of this profession is actually quite gendered, right? Like, you know, 150 years ago, this was considered the kind of, all women learned how to play the piano because it made you apparently, you know, good marriage material. It was part of, like, you know, the set of skills that you were supposed to cultivate. And so that's why every piano, you know, middle class and upper class piano household had a piano in it. And that's why all these women studied piano. But then the kind of education that was available to women, musically speaking, was mostly to be music teachers or to accompany singers. And listening to the way you both describe your training paths, what is become required of your positions it requires so many different skill sets and so many different levels of expertise. It's interesting that, you know, 150 years later, I'll be sitting on a panel with someone and she'll point out to me that it's heavily male dominated. And I mean, there's something sort of patriarchy about that, you know, like the more expertise the profession requires, then of course that only men can do it. And it's, I don't know, there's something there that's interesting to me. And I just hearing how much, I mean, even just, you know, these very sweet anecdotes about the two of you feeling like you're learning everything so quickly and like feeling like imposters, which you've never ever been imposters, please. You know, you're both experts. You have to know so much to do what you do well, and of course anybody can do that. But it's interesting how over time you know, you think about the generation above us, and the famous pianists are the, you know, the Gerald Moores and the Martin Aesops and Martin Katz and Warren Jones and so forth and so
Yeah,
forth.
I think it's, I remember being in the room during that panel, Nick, in Philadelphia, and being like you, kind of surprised by that comment, because in this country, I think we're very fortunate. I mean, Myra and I both studied with well-known men pianists, but my teacher trained with a woman, Gwendolyn Kodolsky, who was the pioneer of collaborative piano in this country. And we're so fortunate to have role models in Margot Garrett and Jean Barr, Rita Sloan, Ann Epperson. Who am I missing, right? And any number of women in this country. That may not be true everywhere, but we're certainly fortunate for that in this country. So I remember being kind of surprised by that, because, and maybe I tend to be naive about these things anyway, but yeah, I don't know.
No, I think you're right that in this country it is a bit more balanced. But I mean, when you're backstage at Wigmore Hall, they have a whole wall of pianists who play with singers backstage, and it is all it's men. There is not a woman to be found on that wall. And I mean, they're all amazing men, and they're all amazing pianists, and, you know, wonderful musicians. But it's just, I could see why her perspective was sharper coming from where she was coming from, in a way.
Right.
I kind of love that she made that comment. It actually makes me very happy, because it's sort of like, oh, somebody noticed. And yeah, I do think on the performing stage that it does apply. There aren't that many, well, I don't know. I feel like in this day and age, it's hard to have a performing career, you know, for anybody, because the opportunities are not so abundant, you know, and so that the career itself, I feel like, is suffering a bit, you know, but, you know, having said that, I don't know, it hasn't been on my mind, you know, in terms of like pursuing the career, because most of my opportunities come out of relationship, you know, almost all of them. I mean, at some point, there are points where it's through connection, you know, through a manager, or oftentimes a singer will introduce me to another singer or something like that. But yeah, it's just not on the radar, because you develop a professional rapport with someone, and you do the work, and they like you because you're good and because you get along, you know? So like Shannon said, though, I think we are very, very blessed in this day and age to not have certain doors put in front of us. But at the same time, I think a lot of the doors come from within. You know, I was just thinking, as you were talking, Shannon and Nick, about how, you know, a lot of the struggles that I have it's that voice, it's my voice inside my head that's telling me, you don't know enough, you know, you're not confident enough, you're not a big enough personality, you know. And those thoughts, nobody else put in my head. Not really, you know, maybe a couple moments here and there.
I was like, are you sure?
You sure?
I know. There is that one. But but I was just thinking, like, where did those thoughts come from? And I for me, you know, those thoughts came from my childhood, growing up. As you know, for me, my personal context is like being an immigrant family in America. And, you know, my father used to tell me, you know, often he would say, don't ever think of yourself as the same as the white people. You're not, and you'll never be, you know. And maybe that wasn't so helpful in the sense that, you know, he's very economical with his words. So there wasn't like a follow-up of, you know, because you are, you know, this and this and this and this, you know, and in my head, it was just kind of like, okay, like I'll never belong, you know, and that feeling, I will admit, continues, you know, because I don't, and it's interesting, you know, when we're programming these concerts, you know, and, you know, Shannon, Nick, you know, when we all were here in Philadelphia in this very, you know,
Very
condo
space.
hotel. Yes, that we were all staying in together. I've just been reliving our memories like for the last week and a half. You know, just all of those programs, those wonderful programs, you know, that represented so many different identities, you know, ethnic identities. It's a real challenge for me because I don't identify very, very strongly in any particular one. You know, I don't particularly identify as Korean. I was born in America, and I don't identify as American. I'll be totally honest. You know, I say I'm American because I know I should, and I have a U.S. you know passport, but I don't own it emotionally, and I hate to admit that. I feel bad admitting that because it's a right that has been given to me, you know, and it's a total gift to be able to be a citizen here. But I don't know. Yeah, there's more processing to be done. So.
Yeah, and I mean that's a lot of what, I mean, I've been processing similar feelings for my adult lifetime too. And that's kind of I've felt really lucky and very fortunate and so grateful to you both that you were willing to go on that journey with me as I explored that with 18 other people. And
it was
audiences in
amazing.
Philly.
It was an
epic.
amazing journey. It was fantastic.
But
so
it felt
wonderful.
I think it was actually maybe it was at the following panel where I remember admitting that to the room, a very similar thought. And it's crazy to say it out loud, especially with our you know American accents and American identities.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true.
It's I think there's something about a music education because we get so embroiled in it, right? That it requires so much of us. I mean, just listening to your two stories just now, and then I think of my own and how we've really devoted our lives to this art form because we love it so much that it becomes sort of a singular focus. And I think sometimes, especially, you know, we are fortunate to live in a day and age in which there really aren't, you know, these obvious doors that stand in front of us, particularly in our education, that say, you know, you're a woman, you can't do this, or you're a, you know, an Asian person, you can't do that. Like we seem to be in this place where those doors are in a, you know, people are starting to use terms like microaggression in this day and age. And we're now talking about subtleties and gradations of suffering and injustice. And it's because it's less obvious in a way, and because what is so obvious is what is required of us in order to do our job, because that is, I mean, that work always has to come first. It's funny, I think sometimes I find personally that I don't really think about those things until it's pointed out to me or until it's asked. And you know,
yeah, I think when I used the word naivete earlier about myself, I think that's a lot of what it is. You know, I'm very lucky that I grew up white to white parents who told me I could do anything I wanted to do. And so I believed that. And I was talented in a very small town, right? So there wasn't like a lot of competition. I didn't know that I had to really fight for anything. I went to a women's college. So the idea of, you know, waiting for a man to speak in the classroom before I did, that didn't enter the picture at all. I remember my first, I mean, it was amazing. My first experience with that sort of issue in the classroom was when I took a summer course that was co-ed. And I remember, I always sit in the front of the room and I'm a very diligent student. And I remember the professor calling on my male counterpoints before, and I had never, or counterparts, excuse me, I had never experienced that in the classroom before. And then as I navigated my career, it just, I think I just had blinders on that I thought it was hard for everybody. And so if there were any sort of barriers put up in front of me because I was a woman or a young looking woman or a small woman, I was never aware of it until much after the fact. It was always kind of looking back and saying, oh, wait a second, that wasn't right. Or someone would point it out to me. And another component of that, I think, and I don't know, Myra, if you've experienced this, I think that kind of growing up where I grew up and kind of playing the kind of gender role that I did, I think that I've always been navigating how to be a woman in a male-dominated space, to the extent that I'm aware now of what that looks like, but as an adolescent, as a young woman, I don't think I was ever aware of it, of kind of how I participated in that, or how I would try to head it off at the past, like the unconscious or subconscious flirtations, and to make my space safe for me, or to make the space navigable for me in the ways that I knew would be acceptable. Does that make sense? Yeah. I think it's it's quite deep. I'm aware of it now, but yeah, it's interesting.
That is interesting. I think as you like say that, I'm like, oh yeah, actually I did the same thing.
Yeah.
Like in opera rehearsals, like when one of the cast members starts flirting with you or whatever, like God forbid you make them uncomfortable by saying, please don't do that.
Right. Exactly.
And you just kind of like, yeah, okay, right. I gotta go. Like
right. Exactly. Yeah.
Things like that. Yes.
It's interesting. I mean, you both sort of have touched on this too. It's you have to think about how, and I mean, I'm not saying that men don't think about how they convey their authority or just, kind of navigate relationships in a room, because so much about what you do is about navigating relationships. But it's different for women. I mean, that's my observation. I'm obviously not a woman, so I don't want to speak for you, but that's what I see sometimes. And
yeah, I think so. I mean, of course, that's human, right? When we get together to get work done, we're always figuring out personalities very quickly. And I think Myra and I both have very strong instincts about the people that we're in a room with. And I sometimes believe I'm finely tuned to those things because I am a woman. I think women tend to be, because that's a safety thing primarily, maybe.
You're also INFJ.
And we're INFJ, that's true. Forgot about that.
Wow, you guys are revealing so much about yourselves here today.
That explains why you like us both so much, Nick. You are drawn to INFJs.
Are you telling me I have a type? I have a type.
You might have a type. It seems apparent.
There's only 2% of
right.
INFJs
We're very rare.
So we are very
rare. Well, I appreciate rare and beautiful and unique things. So there you are, and people.
Sorry, Shannon.
No, that's okay. I was going to say that there are certain. I certainly think about my womanness in certain situations with people I'm working with more than I do in other situations. Well, I'll just leave it at that. And how I counter a perception, right? And so there are moments when I am more outwardly assertive than I might be in other situations for that reason. And I've always found that an interesting dynamic, particularly when I work with men. I'll just say that. Certain men.
Thank you.
You're welcome. That's all.
I should say, by the way, Facebook friends, if you have questions, please, for our wonderful panel guests here, please ask them in the comments. I am looking at them. Terry and Bob Bryan are so sweet. They keep tuning in, you guys.
I love it. Hi, Bob and
Yes.
Terry.
They say hi too. And Myra, they said specifically that they loved your recital with Larry in San Francisco. And
thank you so much.
Harry Silverstein. Hello, Harry. It's great to see you.
Harry.
Harry, when you were talking about having babies, he said that the baby thing is the most significant change for performing artists for sure. Christina Juka Krause, I think I'm pronouncing your name correctly. So interesting to hear both of your journeys, Myra and Shannon. I'm so grateful that there are many wonderful female role models out there for us pianists now. I don't think I met any until grad school.
Wow, Christina's a wonderful pianist. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, I really think that, the women need to support one another, right, Shannon?
Yes, absolutely, 100%.
Because it's funny because sometimes the pushback you can experience is from your own kind sometimes, and I'm really hopeful that we all in our own spheres of influence and circles can endorse and live out that kind of energy where we support each other and cheer each other on and remind each other that there's room for all of us,
You're here.
And yeah. That's what we have to keep doing.
That's right. It's one reason I'm so grateful that Nick has brought us together, Myra. I feel like some of my favorite moments in Philadelphia recently were just opportunities to kind of commiserate.
Oh no.
You mean like when I skipped a song in Clairiere? You mean
right?
That moment?
I remember that moment. That was one of my favorite moments of all time. Myra, it reminded me that we're all human. Even Myra is a human being.
How? Oh my gosh! Are you kidding me? That is like
That was
such an
fantastic.
understatement.
It was fantastic.
Yes,
I loved it.
Yes, it was great.
I have to say that was Lily Boulanger's fault. She composed too many songs for this.
Too many songs. It's an editorial decision.
Yeah. How dare she be so
known by
prolific.
then that I was skipping a song, but the pages stuck together. I was like, okay. And Nick, like a pro, like adjusted. Like
Amazing.
oh, okay, we're skipping.
You're very sweet. I spent the whole next song thinking, did we skip?
Was that me?
Did we do it? Like, what happened? Maybe it's next. Do I have the order wrong? Like,
Gosh,
I love
amazing.
it. So good.
Yes.
oh, we've confessed too much. Do you have any closing thoughts for or words of wisdom for other wonderful women pianists out there?
Oh wow. Well, I think what Myra said was great about supporting each other and seeking each other out and not being afraid either to actively seek out maybe women who are further along in their journey and talking to them about their experience, because we've all been there. And I think that I wish that I had done that earlier on. I was fortunate to have a strong woman teacher for during my master's degree, and that was really helpful. But yeah, I think it's important to seek out those voices of inspiration along the way.
Yeah, I totally agree. And to add to that, I think, being a collaborative pianist, we're often called accompanists, which is partially what we're doing, but a lot of the time we are equal partners, and sometimes even dominant partners, like you look at the Liszt's Petrarch songs or Dichterliebe, and it's written for piano with voice accompaniment in some ways,
Right.
But
in all the ways.
Yeah, exactly. I think to really come into your own as a collaborative pianist, and for any kind of performing arts, so much of it has to do with confidence. And it's about being confident that you have something to say and that what you have to say is beautiful and interesting and important. And I think that if you make it a goal to discover those things about yourself, you know, that you are proud to put out there, your voice will be heard. You know, nothing drives me more nuts than watching a performance of a pianist and a singer where the pianist is sitting behind the keyboard like this, you know, and there's no freedom. It's like they're not allowed to say anything. They're just keeping time and rhythm and harmony for the singer, you know. It is a collaboration, and you are painting the stage, you know, and commenting and even influencing, you know, the message that's happening. So confidence, you know, it takes all of life to discover that. You don't take a class on confidence, right. You know, it's about becoming. So to steal a word from Michelle Obama, you know,
right.
And so, yeah, but as a woman, like, you know, go for that, work on becoming who you truly are. And that'll come out into your music and you'll find your space, you know.
I love that. My dear teacher and mentor reminded me, I think at one of my very first lessons at Michigan, that this word accompany really means to go with, and it's to go alongside your partner. And it's not about following or being behind. It's about being right there, lockstep. And you can't do that if you don't have something to say, and you don't have something to bring to the table. And our ability to prepare in such a way that we're ready to take that journey alongside another artist is a really a great way of being in the space that Myra's talking about, of bringing your full self to the music making and that partnership. I really love that.
Absolutely.
Well, you both definitely walk the walk that you talk. You practice what you preach in the most beautiful of ways, and it is one of the greatest joys about making music with both of you is that is exactly what it is. It feels like chamber music. And I mean, I came into this from being a violinist, and so that's the thing that I always miss the most, and I'm always looking for the most when I'm singing. And I find that with both of you, and this is not hyperbole to say that it is truly one of the greatest privileges of my life to be able to make music with both of you on a regular basis. So
likewise,
the same. Yes, absolutely.
I thank you so much for being so generous with your time and your wisdom and your life stories today and your perspectives. We are so grateful to both of you, we being CAIC. And I should just say to Facebook before we go that we're going to take next week off because next week we're filming our festival. We are doing the thing. It's very exciting. So Myra's actually going to be here soon, and we're all going to be rehearsing like mad and filming songs like crazy and preparing these broadcasts for you for next month. So we're going to take next month off from Heard Over the Piano, and the next CAIC event, I'm going to let Shannon plug because it is...
Oh. That will be our master class with the wonderful, effervescent, brilliant Myra Huang. We mentioned it earlier in the program, but this master class will broadcast on October 2nd. Yes, that is the date. Yes. Featuring 5 singer and pianist teams in repertoire by composers and poets who are women of color. So in keeping with our festival theme of the women, and also exploring a much needed kind of area of the repertoire that we don't always spend enough time exploring. So I'm excited about that.
Me too.
That's that.
Great. So we will see everybody next Friday at 7, October 2nd. And until then, have wonderful 10 days. Good night, Facebook. We'll see you
Good
soon.
night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.